I'm Dan Archer, immersive journalist with EMPATHETIC Media and graphic journalist with Arch Comics. So I see interactive storytelling as fundamentally it's a platform in which the audience's response and choices within a story will then change the following parameters of that story. So based on where they look, where they click, where they happen to move, the story will adapt and essentially bear into account those interactions and changes and change as a result. We've produced a wide range of stories across the extended reality spectrum, from augmented to virtual to mixed reality. We tend to produce pieces that either explain or bring together content or people that people might not be familiar with inside an interactive context. So we use the user agency to help facilitate that sort of understanding of new concepts in a way that we see as both didactic and entertaining, hopefully. I think they offer so many different affordances for doing that. The third dimension of storytelling allows a sort of a plethora of new interactions and analytics that allow us to both study and take advantage of these new opportunities for attention and locomotion and interaction. But they do bring with them, concomitant challenges. I think for me, it's a question of perspective, and I think most fundamentally they allow us to re-examine our own inherent perspectives that we bring to story and to nonfiction, and to really sort of almost look both outwardly at the interactive space, but inwardly as the prejudices and biases that we have ourselves that are perhaps sort of less consciously guiding our choices and influences. That's the golden $64 million question. I would say empathy, and it's interesting because I think empathy has become it's become almost synonymous with virtual reality, given some of the original claims that were made when Oculus first got bought by Facebook in 2014. And what I like to describe as the sort of summer of virtual love in 2016, where all these different films came out and all these different experiences that promised a lot of audiences sort of access to this empathy machine. And I think empathy itself is such a nebulous term, and you need to sort of unpack it. I think on one hand, yes, an affective relationship with the people and characters that we describe in our stories is fundamental, that emotional connection. But at the same time, how can we operationalize that relationship? It's not quite enough to just to have that relationship. We need to think about, what does it mean? How will it impact? And so I was looking at, through the two studies that I've done, both at Columbia and now at UCL, essentially looking at how empathy, or what the sort of constellation of different things that constitute empathy, like higher interaction, a sense of cognitive perspective taking, can facilitate sort of information retention as well as play into performance. So the task completion times, as well as looking at other factors maybe that aren't so obvious, like physiological responses like heart rate and biosignals. Well, I think it's a very interesting time. Coincidentally, that 2016 spike in empathy-driven films like Clouds Over Cedra and 6x9, a lot of sort of different interactive experiences whose goal was to put you in another's shoes. 2016, the sort of one of the words of the year, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, was post-truth. And I think perhaps there's a sort of almost like a sort of shadow, in a Jungian sense, like a shadow-self relationship between this push towards affective, emotional responses to storytelling and this then shift to post-truth, where maybe empirical evidence and scientific rationale is left by the wayside in favor of a more emotional appeal. And so I think I think, we obviously have to tread cautiously. I think it's why, it's led to a number of different problems, as we've seen with Brexit, the Colombian referendum, obviously a certain person's election. And I would say, most fundamentally, I think we have to recognize that interactive storytelling forms part of a suite of different experiences that together will try and help build these bridges, but it isn't a silver bullet. It's not the be all and end all. And I think that you have to, particularly when we look at the experience time of a lot of these stories, it's relatively short, and so we need to look at other ways, like whether it's episodic or serialized distribution of these stories, so that over a long period of time we can hopefully have some of the impact that we hope to have, rather than optimistically claiming that after a 10-minute experience inside a virtual refugee camp, suddenly you'll see things in a completely different light. Well, I think so. Interestingly enough, I see the future of immersive storytelling as a more quantified relationship to this concept of empathy or perspective taking. And that's why, through my research at UCL, I'm particularly interested in the biosignals, the heart rate variability, galvanic skin response, temperature, and how we can look at a sort of second-by-second breakdown of what's happening in real time, and potentially use that to establish a ground truth that then will feed back into a system and it will change accordingly. So I think that's how we can measure, and on top of a different layer maybe of like the implicit association test or more quantifiable measures where you can say, okay, so impact has been by such percent. I mean, it's still very challenging, I think, to extrapolate very effective emotional appeals into a quantifiable, objective, dare I say it, context where such and such as biosignals respond in such and such a way. But the other inherent challenge, obviously, is all the different noise that can come about as a result of this data collection. So someone's demographic profile, or how often they exercise, or whether they've been exposed to this sort of media before. So I think it's a very interesting space, but I do think that increasingly, one of the phrases that I sort of repeat ad infinitum is that within these free systems like Facebook or Meta, whatever it happens to be called from day to day, if there isn't a price of admission, if it's free, then you are the product. And I think our series of behaviors and our responses are the analytics by which advertisers will then later learn to target us. So I think it's a very interesting time, but we have to make sure that the technology stays on the right path and in the right hands. I mean, I think the key advice that I would give sort of budding immersive journalists is exactly relates to the question in terms of using the tools. So I think don't be afraid of them. Fortunately, a lot of the game engines like Unity or Unreal are available for free. It does take some time to dig into them, but I would encourage them to play around with the tools and to try and tell very short stories, to experiment. That's literally the way that we're still learning to do it as new technologies become obsolete or evolve. And so I would say it's a question of trying to both stay abreast of those developments, but then also to fundamentally realize that it's storytelling that is at the heart of this. The technology is a great bolt-on, but fundamentally the story is what really carries the weight. And so the more people and stories they can file and people that they can talk to, fundamentally, I think that will then take them to where they need to go.